Welcome to Saturdays at 7, Christian Scholars Review's conversation series with thought leaders about the academic vocation and the relationship that vocation shares with the church. My name is Todd Ream. I have the privilege of serving as the publisher for Christian Scholars Review and as the host for Saturdays at 7. I also have the privilege of serving on the faculty and the administration at Indiana Wesleyan University. Our guest is Robert D. Kelly, president of the University of Portland. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Community is a word almost every campus uses, at least in its mission materials, orientation efforts, athletic programs, you name it, and it's just about ubiquitous now in higher education. But over the course of the last decade and a half, however, community's proven more difficult to find in American higher education. At least our students are telling us that. Recent studies, for example, indicate that as many as 2/3 of students report being lonely. And not surprising, scholars are beginning to connect rates of loneliness with rates of psychological duress. Recent studies indicate that as many as 1/3 report being in a state of duress at any given point in time. As a university president who began his career as a residence hall director, how do you define community?
I think that's a really great way to start us off. And when I think about community, I think about, Paul writing to the Corinthians, there is one body, but it has many different parts. And all the parts make up that one body. And I think about the community that we're trying to create on campuses, be it in the classroom or in the residence hall, at our Chapel of Christ the Teacher, just different locations. It's really important that each and every person know that they're an indispensable part. They play an indispensable role within that community as we're trying to bring people together. Everyone has something to offer. And so for us, we want we're a small, intimate community, but yet we have the attractions of like Division I athletics and all these really cool things that you see at really large institutions. I want to make sure that every student, every faculty member, every staff member knows that I am known, I am loved, and I belong. So I'm known, I'm loved for who I am and all that I bring, but I belong here.
In what ways is that sense of belonging that you seek to cultivate then at the University of Portland reflective of its founding religious order and the Congregation of Holy Cross?
It's funny. I just got back from, I was in New Orleans at a talk of a number of presidents around higher education. And when I think about how we think about community, it's core. It's core to who we see ourselves as Holy Cross. It's certainly one essential of the phrases within Holy Cross is to see how they love one another, to see how they love one another. And when the Blessed Basil Moreau, when he founded the whole community, he placed family at the core. And so there's fathers and brothers and sisters, and kind of everyone plays. So it's very much like a family. And so when I think about, we have a model of residentiality, and that's how we phrase it. Our model of residentiality on our campus. It's our speaking culture. It's kind of who we are. So you say hi to people when you pass them on the way. Certainly, and that happens a lot of places, but do you stop to hear the response? We have a thing on campus, and I've worked at many institutions where you try to create this where people come together, whether it's grounds crew, faculty, student development administrators, academic advisors. We all come together in our Holy Cross dining room, and everyone sits together, and it's a model that works. And I've worked at places that trying to get the faculty club up and running. It doesn't work, but it's part of our DNA, part of our DNA that we're going to engage with one another and really see how they love one another, see how they interact with each other, because that's a really important thing about who we are and how we communicate.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I want to ask for your sort of assessment as someone with a student affairs background then and expertise about the data concerning rates of loneliness and psychological duress being reported by students. In what ways are the challenges you think that students are facing unique to what they're experiencing in college, what they bring with them to college, or a mixture of the two?
It's another really deep question. And I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, if we were to aggregate some of this into the whole population and to see that gosh, a lot of people are feeling lonely, depressed, and mental health, how it plays a role. And these things are all connected. I certainly think that the pandemic and COVID had a lot to do with it, that people were kind of isolated into their own home. I think we had a lot of time, maybe sometimes too much time, interacting with just ourselves or our immediate family. But I also think, social media has a huge role to play in some of this, and the ways in which it's like there's the opportunity to have the social media, but then there's the responsibility of being able to still learn how to talk and interact. We had certain rules. I have 2 children, and we had certain rules in place, about where a phone could be in the house. Um, at what point could you get on social media, and at what point could you then have access to an app or whatever the case might be? And so I think that, some of these are, we've created some poor habits that
Mhm.
that young people have, and it turns into poor habits that adults then have. And I'll say that, and I'll also say I think we have a lot of major institutions that have let people down, and I think we have some people who behave badly on national stages that have let people down, and we've shown people that this is how you interact with one another. These things are okay, and we have to care. We have to care about what's going on for other people, and we have to know that we're there for each other. And so I think that what I try and do, or at least try and model, is that our distinctive community here at the University of Portland can be a place that's an antidote to some of this, where faculty and staff and students are going to feel supported, but they're going to see examples of what that
Mm.
support looks like. And they're going to see examples and feel those things as they kind of go through their experience. Are we accompanying each other? Because accompaniment is the most important thing that we're going to be able to do. Are we going together with people through times of success and when everything is great and you're getting lots of likes, but also times when there's failure and hardship and stumble, but you're going to get back up and you're going to be held accountable and we're going to keep moving forward together. And I use the example of I want people to hold me accountable. Think about what that means. When you hold somebody, it's an embrace. And I think that that's at the heart of what we're trying to do. We're teaching people really tough things about the world and life and how to take their conscience and their character and their competency and bring that all together. But we have to walk with each other to do that.
Thank you. I want to go back to one of the details you were talking about earlier, but it relates to this image that you've just painted of us walking together. How do we do so and create a sense of unity on campus without forging uniformity, where people feel like they belong, they feel connected to one another, but they're also capable of retaining the space to express themselves in their own created being, in their own created way?
And that's an interesting one that's come up recently as people think that we're things that colleges and universities do to tear people apart or put people in different sections or factions. And when I think about again, Blessed Basil Moreau said, you know, we're going to cross borders of every sort from the beginning of our founding to even think about the richness, the true richness of diversity, the true richness of sitting across from someone else. When I was in graduate school, I had a faculty member, and he had been educated at Georgetown, and he said something like, "Find the truth in what you oppose, and the error in what you believe. Find the truth in what you oppose, and the error in what you believe." And I think that it goes back to my idea of we're one body. We're one group, and at the same time, we have many different parts. We have many different kind of intricacies and body parts and ideas, and it's all coming from different places. But that tradition within Holy Cross reinforces that each person is made the image and likeness of God. And so, again, each person.
Yeah.
And so we start from a place of love in each person. And because we are Catholic, because we are Holy Cross, we can draw upon different things to go across borders and to talk to people who are different and who might believe something different, and it not be something that tears us down, but something that builds us all up.
Yeah.
And that's my model for how we kind of think about it. But
Yeah.
there's unity, but gosh, there's such diversity in that unity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to ask you now about your own calling as an educator and how that process came to be and the formation process you've experienced over the course of your life. You earned an undergraduate degree in political science from Loyola University in Maryland, master's in higher education from the University of Vermont, and a PhD in higher education from the University of Maryland. As a political science undergraduate, I first have to ask, what happened on the way to law school? Or perhaps more to core to the point, at what point did you begin to discern education and higher education would prove central to your calling?
I will say that my parents placed a premium on
Mm.
education, and they, and in fact, put it up on a pedestal. And I remember my mom would say things like, and I went to Catholic schools growing up, and she said, you know, my money, like the United Negro College Fund, her money was a terrible thing to waste. And so to make sure that I was being as involved as I could in terms of what a true education could really look like. And so for me, I saw the transformative power and the impact of a transformative education on the lives of so many different people. And my parents want to make sure that that was in my life as well. So when I got to college, I was involved in lots of different things because I think you have to squeeze the sponge dry of everything that an institution is going to offer you. But eventually I became student body president. As a political science major, I remember I would walk in the classes and I would say to a professor, he would say, "Hey, Dr. Kelly," because they also always will call everyone doctor or senator or president. You would always. And he goes, I know I see you have a meeting with the faculty senate today, or you have this with the university planning and priorities committee. Well, you could get out of class and go to that meeting, but I'd like to hear what happens at that meeting. Or we could stay on campus if you agree to do some level of community service over the summer. You could stay for free. And I remember I was up late at night studying for the LSATs. It was the summer between my junior and senior year, and I kind of fell asleep and dozed off, and I read the same section of the book again. I fell asleep, dozed off, read the same section of the book again. And I went in the next day to see the dean of students and said, I'm not sure about this law school thing because I kept falling asleep on some of the reading. And, one day I want to jump like yours. I want to
Hmm.
jump like yours one day where you're getting to meet great students. You're having these aha moments with students. You're transforming the institution. It's new every day. And she looked at me and she said, we thought you'd get to that at some point, but you have to get there on your own.
Yeah.
And she and so many other people, when I was an undergrad student, they were just such great models and mentors and truly took care of me. And so, as a student leader, I got to see how the sausage was made of higher education. And honestly, I thought right away, this is a place where I think I can make an important contribution to life.
Yeah.
How do I get in there? How do I do it? And so that's how I ended up in higher ed.
Are there any other mentors or voices that spoke into you during those years or during your graduate years that helped contribute to that sense of vocation?
Yeah, I remember I wanted to do an internship in Washington D.C. Through a program there, but to do it, you had to have presidential approval of
Mm.
your institution. It had to sign off on a sheet, and I went in to meet with the president. He goes, "Well, this looks like a great program. It's something you should probably do, and I have an idea. I want you to do something for me as well." And it was a program in New York City where you went and it was kind of this vocational discernment and vocation kind of a
Mhm.
program. And I realized at one point it was a program to bring people into the society of Jesus. I thought about it. I did.
Yeah.
But I thought, there's also some other things I want in my life. And so I really got to the point of thinking about vocation and how what I do in this line of being the head of an apostolic work for Holy Cross. Vocation is very much the line that I use with it. And regardless of like what a person does, I always try to get students and others with whom I work to remember that you have to align the thing you do for a living that's giving you some kind of a paycheck with what where you find meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
And then you're doing all right. And so, I knew I loved Catholic higher education, whether I was going to be like a general counsel or a president or a dean of students or a dean of an academic area. my general philosophy was I'm just going to keep saying yes. And you say yes, and then you present yourself with these wonderful opportunities that you don't close the door on anything. And again, you keep saying yes, you keep showing up, and you keep trying to do your best job.
Yeah. Thank you. You've mentioned Blessed Basil Moreau on a couple of occasions as someone whose work to which you've turned for inspiration and understanding. Are there other authors that have helped sort of shape your perspective of education, higher education, and your sense of vocation?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so many people. I mean, I think so much of who I am and was formed within was in Jesuit higher education,
Mm.
and so I think it lends me nicely over to kind of a Holy Cross education with the Congregation of Holy Cross. But I read a lot on issues around service and justice. I mean, I a lot of stuff with Parker Palmer. I remember
Mm.
that experience of reading a lot of his stuff. Of course, as I mentioned, St. Ignatius of Loyola and letters and things like that. But for me, it's so much about having guides and storytellers who've been at an institution who can tell you the stories that make up a place.
Mm.
It can help you to understand the ethos and the charism and the beauty and the joy and also the pitfalls and challenges of an institution. Because I think all of that it's woven together to create a tapestry of like, gosh, here's how you get things done, but also here's how you were formed, and here's how you can be successful in this organization if you listen to these stories and you walk with these people who are storytellers and guides who are taking you down a path. I think that that's one of the most important things that one can do. So you certainly have to have a philosophy of life and things that can influence who you are, how you make decisions, especially when times get tough or when you're deciding between two negatives or two positives.
Mm.
So you have to have a conceptual framework in your head. But gosh, philosophical writings of theologians and philosophers and certainly never do harm. These are all things that have played a huge role in my own development. And my dissertation was really focused on ethics.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, you began your career as a residence hall director at Colgate University in New York State in particular, but you eventually moved out of the hall, as student development professionals often reference it, and encountered a variety of roles at institutions such as Seattle University and Loyola University also, but this one in Chicago. Would you please describe the discernment process that led you to commit to service in higher education that included those roles? Roles that also eventually led you to broaden your experience and expertise beyond the co-curricular realm.
one of my mentors in graduate school said to me, always write something, submit something for publication, submit something to present at a conference. You got to find ways to get out of your own head. And a way to do that is you got to talk to other people and share what's going on in terms of where your own thinking, whether it's around maturity or whatever the case might be. You have to do that. And so I remember always thinking, like, even if it gets rejected or gets turned down, finding ways to engage in kind of the life of the mind and not taking it personally if
Mm.
someone doesn't like something I've written. And so my wife and I, we've tried to write things together. That's one of the hardest things ever, to write something with someone that you love, because you're like, you're criticizing my use of my word choice here. And then it becomes personal. So you try to not ever take it personal. But again, this goes back to my vocation of finding ways that I can influence higher education to make it better for
Mm.
everybody, to make the ecosystem of what we're doing work. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to do something that is truly revolutionary. When you think about American higher education, let alone like higher education, the world needs what we are doing. The world needs more graduates from places like the University of Portland, as an example. We need more of that because we are living in a world where sometimes it's too easy to make the wrong choice.
Hmm.
And we have to think more deeply. And so again, I go back to saying yes, showing up, leaning into kind of there's a way in which we want to anchor, and we use that word really intentionally here at the University of Portland, anchor ourselves into something greater and bigger outside of ourselves and make the world a better place. And so
Yeah.
we want our students to lead with a sense of action and purpose. So you're going to get this great education. Hopefully, you're going to get a great job and contribute to your alma maters, wherever they might be. But you have to be called to act in a way that is courageous, just, loving, and inclusive. And so for me, whether it was being a hall director, being a director of a Center for Ethics and Standards, being an assistant VP, a VP, a chief of staff, an assistant to a president, as a president, all of those things play into I'm making the world better. I am trying to do something outside of myself. And so vocation, again, it goes back to saying yes to everything that I possibly can. Um, and knowing that I have something to offer.
Any of the roles that you filled over the course of your career leading up to your service now as president, did any of them provide you with a greater sense of vocational satisfaction, intrinsic satisfaction? And maybe that same sense of satisfaction occurred in a couple of different roles, but if possible, yeah, could you articulate what that is for you?
Well, actually, I think that each role kind of prepares you for the next thing, and kind of
Mm,
you have a new insight. So I'll start from the beginning. Like my first job, I was in the residence halls,
yeah,
and one you see it all. You see it all for better or for worse. You see students at their best,
yeah.
and you see them at their worst. Be it 2 o'clock in the morning, or at a dear friend, he and I wrote a paper on who you are or what you do when no one's watching,
Mm,
or when you think no one's watching. So every job is kind of gives you something. So certainly the hall director, you just walk into it with a sense of love and zest and vitality for being with students.
yeah.
And that's the emotion. I love being with students. And I start the year off every year at our president's welcome, the convocation, telling the student, I love each and every one of you.
Mm,
And that love is at the center of everything we're trying to do around the educational experience for the students. I had a great experience when I was the director of a student ethics and standards program at the University of Vermont. We dealt with conduct, the academic side, student behavioral side, and you got to see students and how they make sense of the world and how they're setting building blocks for decisions that they're going to make later in life. That was certainly so informative for me. Or even when I was a mission officer, the first time I became a mission officer, looking at the Catholic mission of the institution. You hold all of these different things, and each of these roles that I've played throughout my time, they prepared me to certainly sit in this seat as president because I've seen it all. But it's also what I've become to realize is that there's no single skill set or mindset makes you most successful. What you need is lots of different experiences that I can then bring me with me to the table as president of the institution. And so I probably know a lot about the issues of ethics and accountability. So I probably know a lot about that, but I know a little bit about a lot of different things. And all of those things come together to help me, I think, to be the best version of a president that I can be. And so I want to be comfortable sometimes with the unknown,
mm,
like what I don't know. You can't freeze if you're trying to solve a problem. You don't have to answer everything about it, but
hmm,
instead you need to step into uncertainty
yeah.
and then tap into the values that help you make the best decision possible. And it might not be the best decision all the time, but when you can tap into, well, here's what I know and here's what I don't know.
Yeah.
And for right now, based on the information I have, given our values, given where we're trying to go, this is where I think we can be. And so all of my different experiences, again, being a hall director, a director of a center, a dean of students, different things like um, help me to understand tricky personnel issues,
Mm.
tenure issues, the finance issues, intercollegiate athletics, student behavior. Some of it comes naturally to me because I'm a curious person.
Mhm.
But some of it I have to lean into because you want to get divergent viewpoints of people who are smarter than you, who know something that you don't already know. But to do that, I think it's critical for success.
Prior to your appointment as president of the University of Portland in 2022, you served as the special assistant to the president at your alma mater, Loyola University, Maryland, where you had all of these roles that you just described, seemingly, at least to me, sort of in your portfolio. And I remember reading the part in your bio that said at the end, and more, which sounds like to me comparable to other duties as assigned, as some of us have seen in our job descriptions. But moving to now to the University of Portland in 2022, can you describe the discernment process that led you to accept that appointment and to move all the way across the country and and to serve as chief officer?
Well, a number of years ago, I was at an international association for Catholic higher education, and we were in Spain, and a president, not of my institution, but of another institution, he leaned across the table and said, "You should think about being a college president."
Hmm.
In fact, I'm going to retire. And he mentioned one day, and you should think about taking my job. And I kind of like looked across and thought, oh, okay. I've never lived in that state. Don't really know much about that institution, but it was wonderful for someone to see in you maybe what you don't see in yourself right away.
Yeah.
And I began to apply for college presidencies, and I didn't get the first one I applied for. I didn't get it, and I made it all the way to the finalists
Hmm.
round, and they went in another direction. And I remember at the time, I wasn't really that excited about that job. I was excited about that position, that role at that institution. But by the end of it, I wanted it. So you begin to like fall in love with what you could do, not so much fall in love with the position. Because I do think some people go in that direction, but I was talking about
Mhm.
falling in love with that particular role because of what I could do. But again, I didn't get it. And I was all in my emotions about it. And someone said to me, Rob, this is good. It's good in life to not get everything you always want. I
Yeah.
remember thinking, I don't like this feeling. But when the University of Portland initially called, I got the email and I had not thought I would consider moving back to the Pacific Northwest. And I was at a conference of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, and I was at the bar that evening, and someone came up to me, looked at my name tag, and said, "So you're Rob Kelly?" And I looked at the person and said, yes.
Yeah.
Should I be worried?" Um, and the person began to talk to me and said, "You received a notice saying that you've been nominated or for the University of Portland." Thought, how do you know that?
Yeah.
And the person said, "Oh yeah, I work there, and I think you should think about it."
Mm.
And we had a long conversation. And I went back up to my room and I read the position profile and all the materials again. I reached out to the search firm and I said, "Listen, something just happened. I think it was providence. It was divine. And
Mm.
I am going to draft you a cover letter that I want you to consider. I want you to think about. And let's see what happens." And I feel really called. I feel really called to one, do the work. It can be extremely challenging on
Mm.
some days. It is exceptionally rewarding and life-giving on others. As I mentioned earlier, I think some people are attracted to the idea of being president in the abstract. They like how it sounds. And I don't think that's ever a good idea. I think you have to be called to the actual work because there's real work involved in it that can sometimes feel backbreaking,
Yeah.
but also can be so just wonderful. For me, picking up and moving across the country, my family needed to be involved in that conversation. And so it's a lot to ask your family to uproot and move themselves, one across the country, but into a very public role. I can go to a CVS or Walgreens or any place, and I remember I was in one, and someone said, "Hey, can I help you?" And I'm talking, and they're like, "What are you getting? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What kind of a weird question for you to be asking me?" And they said, I said, "I'm going out of town." "Well, you coming back, right?" I said, "Uh, yeah, when you go on vacation, you actually do come back. That's the right." And they said, "Well, I know who you are. You're the president of the University of Portland." And it was the first time that it happened where I realized, what is videos, biography? People think they know me
Yeah.
because they've heard or they've seen some kind of interaction, and it's thousands and thousands of them and one of me. And it's a lot of pressure, but um, I I remain committed, and I always said you have to be committed to being joyfully engaged in the life of the work. And if you're joyfully engaged in the life of the work, you're going to be joyfully engaged in the lives of the people that you're influencing, whether it's the students, the faculty, and staff, bring on resources for them to be the best versions of themselves. And you certainly don't do anything for the money or for the opportunities, but you have to you pick your opportunities wisely,
Yeah.
because you'll be most successful in life when you can pick the opportunities wisely. Again, going back to my thing about storytellers and guides and people who's going to accompany you as you go throughout the moments of your life. So for me, that's kind of how I think about the presidency and what I needed to think about before I was willing to say I'm going to accept any appointment. Can I be joyfully engaged? Can I be there? And can I be willing to do the work when it's going to be difficult and when it's going to be challenging? One of the best things, and I'll just end here, when students walk across the stage of graduation, they all say, "Thank you."
Mm.
And I kind of go, I mean, some of them I know, but I don't know all of them. And I didn't teach their class, but they're thanking me. And I
Yeah.
get to be the embodiment of all the ways in which people really want to thank, pay tribute, honor, cherish the institution. Now,
Yeah.
the flip of the balance is you also become the embodiment of all the way, which is what happy about it too. But I think they certainly balance each other, and in many ways, the really wonderful parts. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
In what ways did your experience with the Jesuit charisms at the institutions you served, such as Loyola Chicago, Loyola Baltimore, Seattle University, in what ways did they compare with the Congregation of Holy Cross charisms? And you mentioned that they help prepare you for understanding how a place could be animated, but in what ways are they different, and in what ways did you need to adjust in terms of your engagement with the institution and its culture?
Well, just because it's between us and it's just you and I talking, I don't tell my Jesuit friends and my Holy Cross friends this a lot, but there's a lot of overlap
Yeah.
in terms of how they think about their work. I do think our Holy Cross family does an outstanding job of community and
Mm.
family really, really well, and there's a certain level of warmth that I have found to be systemic in places like Notre Dame or the University of Portland or Stonehill or King's, that sort of thing. I also think it happens at other places as well, as you begin to live into your charism, realizing that place, aspiration, these things play a role in terms of how they influence students and the faculty that you can attract. And so I certainly think that the charisms are similar. But when I think about things that are, I guess, distinctly kind of impact my own leadership in terms of how
Mhm.
I've been formed, the universities that I've chosen to be a part of, where I think I have been probably most successful, are places that are highly relational,
Mm.
kind of places where visibility matters. As president, people like to see when the president shows up to a basketball game, the play that's happening in the Fine Arts Center. They like to see me in the Holy Cross dining room. They like to see me on social media. I try as much as I can to be somewhat appropriately present on social media. And so they want to see me there, but they want to see and be in a place where ego isn't going to go very far.
Mm.
You know, the title, it helps. It's not going to go very far. And so, prizing collegiality, professional humility, those are important things for me that I have picked up from, but one being with the Jesuits as well as being with Holy Cross as well. And again, I find some of the ways of the charisms to be somewhat similar.
Yeah. Thank you. As our time, unfortunately, is beginning to become short, I want to ask you about your understanding of the academic vocation, and in particular, what characteristics and or qualities inform that, whether the academic vocation be exercised by curricular educators in the classroom or co-curricular educators in spaces such as the residence hall or student center.
For me, there's the critical value of an academic vocation is the belief that the truth will set you free.
Hmm.
At its core, the truth will set you free. And I think you have to believe in your soul that the pursuit of knowledge, it's around human flourishment. It's going to lead to a better place. It's going to lead to making the world better. And I think that this is at the heart of the Catholic intellectual tradition. Recently, I visited a high school, St. Francis, near San Francisco in Silicon Valley, and I saw all these different kids, and they would say, "Oh, well, my educator said this," and my educator, I'm like, "Who are you talking about?"
Hmm.
And I asked more questions. They were talking about their teachers in the classroom, certainly. They were talking about the administrative assistant sitting at the desk in admission. They were talking about the person who cleaned the floors in the dining hall. They were talking about the person who was serving the food, that they see them all as educators and all as a part of that ecosystem of the people that are bringing them together. So for me, whether they're in the classroom, outside the classroom, faculty, staff, administrators, no matter who they are, the idea of the truth setting people free, human flourishment, it's all built in together and interwoven. And so I really value that about the Catholic intellectual tradition. And I think when we double down into who we are, with our core being education, with it being nourished with the Catholic intellectual tradition, we're leading to a good place. We're doubling down in that. We're not thinking about onboarding people anymore. We think about everboarding. So it's this constant enrichment for the people with whom we're working, launching retreat programs, articulating values. Again, a place where everyone has something to contribute to the larger community, going back to your first question.
Yeah. Thank you. In what ways, then, is the health of this understanding of the vocation on a church-related campus, such as the University of Portland, reflective and connected to the relationship that universities share with the church itself? Is the health of the academic vocation dependent upon that relationship that the university where it's exercised on?
We have to remember that from the very beginning, the church has always been committed to teaching.
Hmm.
On our campus, we have a statue called the Christus Magister, and it's Christ the teacher, and it's a beautiful statue on our campus. Everyone kind of has to walk past it, and so at our core, it's about teaching. And when the church recognizes the challenges of Catholic colleges and universities in 2025, I think it allows us to have more grace and humility moving forward. But it's critical that that's who we are. We're about teaching. We're about fulfillment. We're about leading towards the path. Again, going back to accompaniment and community. But it's important that all these things come together. It's going to come together differently here at a Catholic college and university than it might at University of Washington, University of Oregon, University of Maryland, whatever that case might be. We're doing it in a different way because we are committed to teaching. We're committed to Christ being the ultimate teacher, and again, leading us towards more grace.
Yeah. For our last question then today, in what ways can the university, the church-related university, and the church be of greater service to one another moving forward in the years to come?
I often think that I want to make sure that a Catholic university is not just in walking in parallel with the Catholic Church, but that we're truly intermingled and in conversation with one another. When I think about what Catholic education does, when you think about it, it's the largest educational system of education in the world. Same way you can look at healthcare. And yet sometimes we can reduce what we're doing to put people in boxes and factions.
Yeah.
And yet we're all moving in the same direction, and we have to see ourselves as the church. And so for me, I hope that we can give each other more grace, but to do that, we have to be in communication, we have to be in dialogue, and we have to be forgiving of realizing we are all in different places, times, and students. And the way that you're going to look at a healthcare system and the way you're going to look at a college and university, and it's going to be different than an elementary school and a social service agency. It all comes together, but we are stronger when we're moving in the same direction and trying to support one another.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our guest has been Robert D. Kelly, president of the University of Portland. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights and wisdom with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was enjoyable.
Thank you for joining us for Saturdays at 7. Christian Scholars Review's conversation series with thought leaders about the academic vocation and the relationship that vocation shares with the church. We invite you to join us again next week for Saturdays at 7.